Time to preview and predict the game. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we love. And it's one of the most important weeks of the year. This is one of the times that I love more than anything. College football distinguishes itself from the other sports because of rivalries. And this is rivalry week. Rivalries in college football are unlike anywhere else. The loyalties, the intensity, the tradition, it divides households, it divides families, and this is one of those with Ohio State and Michigan. They are playing for the Big Ten Eastern Division Championship, and the winner will be heavily favored in the Big Ten Championship game and to get to the college football playoff. Michigan comes in at 10-1. They are a perfect 8-0 in the Big Ten. Of course, their loss was to Notre Dame 24-17 in Week 1 on the road in South Bend. The Buckeyes losing to Purdue in embarrassing fashion 49-20 on the road. They, though, are the same record at 10-1, but they've lost that one game in the Big Ten. Let's get back to the history in the series, and then we'll break down the matchup. Michigan leads 58-49. There's a handful of ties in there, and so some of our younger viewers would be surprised that Michigan, the Maize and Blue, hold the all-time lead. Well, they won the first 12, and Michigan was pretty much there at the beginning of college football, along with a number of schools in the Ivy League. Rutgers, of course, holds the honor of having played the very first and winning the first college football game for a university that is still playing football or at this point trying to figure out how to play football. So Michigan dominated the series early on. It has taken Ohio State over 100 years to try to catch up, and they have yet to do it. Since 2004, though, the Buckeyes have dominated. Jim Tressel won his last 7 games against Michigan. Urban Meyer is a perfect 6-0 against Michigan. You just have the one game in the middle of those two Ohio State eras in which Luke Fickell was the interim head coach, the current Cincinnati coach, and the Buckeyes lost that one to Denard Robinson and company with Braxton Miller at quarterback for the Buckeyes, 40-34 in a 6-7 season. Of course, this one was always heated, intense. There have been books and HBO documentaries built around this series, but it really came to the current fame in the medium of television during the 10-year war of Bo and Woody. In 1950, that was 1 year before Woody Hayes took control at Ohio State, coming from Miami of Ohio. You had the Snow Bowl, one of the famed football games in the history of this series and any series, in which Ohio State did not give up a first down and still lost the game to Michigan 9-3 on a blocked punt. Just snow everywhere. Check out the old film. It's out there. And the Buckeyes losing to Michigan in that one. Then, of course, if you speed up to the late 60s, the 10-year war. Woody had been in Columbus since 1951. This is 1968 at the time. The Buckeyes won the national title, beat USC and O.J. Simpson in the Rose Bowl. Then in 1969, Glenn Bo Schembechler hired former assistant and protege of Woody Hayes at Michigan, and he pulled off one of the major upsets of the season that broke Ohio State's winning streak. The Buckeyes were heavily favored in the game, were considered to be the best team in the country, would repeat as national champion, but Bo brought the rivalry to epic proportions with that win in Ann Arbor, 24-12. The Wolverines upset the Buckeyes. All right, in 1970, with revenge on his mind, Woody Hayes and the Buckeyes blew out Michigan. Final score there was 50-14, and when Woody was asked after the game on the final touchdown, "Why did you go for 2, Coach?" he said, "Because I couldn't go for 3. Bo Schembechler beat Woody Hayes 5-4 with one tie. The tie was very historic because that was in 1974. And no Big Ten teams went to any bowl games unless you won the league and went to the Rose Bowl. Otherwise, Michigan famously had the second best record in college football over a 4-year span and did not go to a bowl game because they lost 3 games to Ohio State and tied the Buckeyes the other time, and the Big Ten would not allow anyone else to go to any bowl games. Because of Michigan's situation, unfortunate situation for them, The Big Ten quickly changed that rule in 1975, and in fact, Michigan was the first other than a champion to go to a bowl game. They went and played Oklahoma in the 75 Orange Bowl. All right, what was unique about 1974? They were both undefeated. They played to a 10-10 tie. Ohio State scored the first 10 points. Michigan scored the next 10 points. Michigan played a much better second half. They missed 2 long field goals that would have won the game. They dominated in terms of every statistical matchup in the second half. So they did not have a tie-breaking system to award the Big Ten championship in the Rose Bowl. They would tie for the Big Ten title, of course. So that went to the Big Ten commissioners to decide. And Ohio State, despite having gone to the 2 previous Rose Bowls, was sent again to the Rose Bowl. And even having lost the previous Rose Bowl, they were sent to go play USC in the Rose Bowl again. And the Michigan quarterback was injured in the game, and his status, without the media and the information flow that we currently have today, there was just speculation on how healthy he would be and if he would be prepared to play in the Rose Bowl. And that apparently caused a number of athletic directors to vote the Buckeyes' way. Others held grudges, and there's an excellent documentary in the Big Ten Network about the 1974 secret vote that cannot be found, but Ohio State won the vote and won the Rose Bowl over USC. Bo Schembechler won the final 3 games against Woody Hayes, 1976, 77, and 78. All 3 deprived the Buckeyes of the Rose Bowl, sent Michigan to the Rose Bowl. And then, of course, Woody Hayes was ousted after the 78 Gator Bowl. Usher in Earl Bruce and his games against Bo Schembechler. And Earl Bruce's first team went 11-0, beat Michigan in Ann Arbor on a blocked punt, 18-15. And Earl Bruce had a 5-4 run against Michigan. And Bo Schembechler was the coach for Michigan from 1969 through 1989. The 90s were marred for the Buckeyes by losing close battles against Michigan in which they were vying for Big Ten and national championships. In 1993, Ohio State was undefeated. 95, 96, undefeated 3 times in 4 years and lost to Michigan. That was John Cooper's undoing to his tenure and legacy at Ohio State. If you look at John Cooper's tenure at Ohio State, it's exceptional. The Buckeyes finished number 2 in the country twice, but Michigan deprived them of shots at national championships 3 times. And also in 1997, of course, Charles Woodson and Michigan won it to move on to a national championship, beating Washington State in the Rose Bowl. Woodson was remarkable in the Ohio State game. He had an interception in the end zone that was key, of course, a punt return for a touchdown, a long catch for a touchdown, or for a long gainer on a Michigan touchdown drive. And he won the Heisman Trophy against Ohio State on that day, and famously out-battled David Boston, and they had some heated moments in their one-on-one matchup. All right, John Cooper, 2-10-1 against Michigan, and out. Enter Jim Tressel in 2001, and his famous speech at the Buckeyes basketball game after he was hired, in which he stated that you will be proud of our Ohio State student-athletes when they walk across this stage in 4 years to receive their diploma. And you will be proud of them in the community. You will be proud of them mostly in 300 and whatever it was, 62 days when we go to Michigan and win the game. And the Buckeyes did that in Jim Tressel's first year in 2001. And a meaningless game in regards to championships, but the Buckeyes won, and that set the trend for Jim Tressel and his success against Michigan. The last time the Wolverines won in a championship setting with their main coaches on the sideline, I mentioned the 2011 game, was in 2003, where you had Henney and, it was John Navarre at the time, and Perry at running back, and tremendous Braylon Edwards at wide receiver, and Michigan won to win the Big Ten title, deprive Ohio State of the Big Ten and the BCS game against LSU in the championship game, 35-21, and that was the 100th game played. I've got the book to that game back here somewhere. I should have pulled it out. All right, much Ohio State, Michigan information behind me, as you can imagine. All right, let's focus on the here and the now. Jim Harbaugh looking for his first win. Of course, he guaranteed a win in 1986, and Matt France missed a field goal, or the Buckeyes would have spoiled that guarantee. But much like Joe Namath, Jim Harbaugh was correct. Wolverines 26-24, a game in which Chris Spielman totaled 29 tackles for the Buckeyes, but Jamie Morris was elusive in that game, rushing for over 200 yards. Harbaugh was great, and Michigan won at 26-24 to move on to the Rose Bowl. Ironically, they lost to John Cooper, and one of the reasons John Cooper was hired by Ohio State was because he beat Michigan, and then he couldn't beat them as head coach at Ohio State. It also brings to mind the Drew Henson performance in the year 2000. That was a great performance at quarterback for Michigan, which he hit like 22 of 25 passes and carved up the Buckeyes 38-26. And, of course, the famous Heisman pose of Desmond Howard in 1991 as the Michigan Wolverines blew out Ohio State at the Big House 31-3. All right, 2018, the Buckeyes have won all these games in a row ever since Urban Meyer stepped on campus 6 straight. Dwayne Haskins has already been introduced to the rivalry, and he showed out last year. He stepped in when J.T. Barrett was injured, his knee knocked out of the game. Dwayne Haskins stepped in and hit on 6 of 7 passes, including that huge 3rd and 18 missile to Austin Mack. Down by a touchdown at 20-14, Haskins led the Buckeyes back. They scored the final 17 points to win 31-20. So he's been in the game in a hostile environment. So Dwayne Haskins has that experience behind him. J.K. Dobbins had a remarkable game against Maryland last week, 37 carries, 203 yards, and a few touchdowns. He did have a fumble at the goal line, but he had to carry the load because Mike Weber had a quad tighten up on him. Apparently, he's okay. That is going to be huge in this game because Mike Weber, not as explosive or dynamic as J.K. Dobbins, but much needed. He was the grinder against Michigan State for 104 yards, and they need both of those backs. Michigan is a better football team than Ohio State right now. This is the first time we can say this since 2011. And going back before that with actual coaches that, not disregarding Luke Fickell, but he had the interim tag in 2011, but the coaches that were hired to coach the teams on the sideline as the head coaches, this is the first time Michigan's been better since 2004, and that Buckeyes team with Santonio Holmes and Ted Ginn and Troy Smith at quarterback, who won the Heisman 2 years later, showed out in that game and played a remarkable game, 300 yards passing, 200 rushing, and beat Michigan, upset Michigan, and the Wolverines still went on to the Rose Bowl to take on Vince Young and company. So this is the first time Michigan's been better. They are better. They are playing better. Maybe the talent on the roster isn't necessarily better across the board, but it has fit better, especially, of course, on defense. We'll get to that in just a second. So Weber's been more productive in recent weeks, but J.K. Dobbins was a man against Maryland, and they needed every ounce of his energy. And Urban Meyer talked about it in the news conference today, that he's concerned about 105 plays wearing on his offensive line and on J.K. Dobbins. So he wants to prepare his team, of course, for the rivalry game, but he needs to rest them as well. So that fine balance, but he talks about that almost every week against every opponent. The Ohio State wide receivers, they've been good, they've been bad. They're experienced, they're speedy, they're fast. They don't have the best hands, any of them. KJ Hill's the most dependable. Paris Campbell, I would think, after not touching the football much against Maryland, has to be key in this game. He's one guy that could be a possible mismatch against Michigan when he gets out in space. He is special. Terry McLaurin had a big downfield catch against Maryland. Of course, he leads the team in touchdown receptions. Campbell, the most receptions overall, followed by KJ Hill, who can work the slot. But the Ohio State wide receivers, the hands are iffy. They drop a lot of passes. They don't make spectacular catches for the most part. It's a good wide receiver core that mostly moves on to the NFL next year. The Ohio State offensive line was shoddy and has been shoddy much of the season, has played better in the last couple weeks in trying to move out opponents in the run game. All right, the Michigan offense. We talked Ohio State offense, Michigan offense. This is the best offense Ohio State has faced this year. That's a difficult statement to make, considering that we would have never thought that. Penn State's been explosive. Trace McSorley and company. We would have thought at the beginning of the season, either TCU or Penn State would have the best offense Ohio State has faced. That doesn't mean that Michigan's going to score the most points, but they have been the most effective. They don't hurry up. They don't run the up-tempo to score the points or get the possessions, but they are the most effective. They hold on to the football. They're third in the nation in fewest turnovers. They have an offensive line that has gotten better every week, and the consistency and the continuity is there for the first time in years up front for Michigan. They have a quarterback who is their best quarterback since when? Chad Henne, possibly, but this guy's mobile. Shea Patterson's playing great football right now. And he gets better by the week. We saw the worst of Shea Patterson in week 1 against Notre Dame. I believe Michigan's better than Notre Dame now. That's a close call, but now. Mobile quarterback, he's comfortable in the offense. He's a running threat. I think it's important possibly that Chris Evans is back after missing 3 or 4 games, that he's now back entrenched. Of course, Karan Higdon, the 1,000-yard rusher, is the main guy. But Chris Evans provides that change-up, a little bit more speed, a little bit more quickness than Karan Higdon. Ohio State has actually played pretty well against the run if you look at each play after play after play after play, but it's the gash plays that have killed them. Of course, Maryland shredded them. Anthony McFarland with 298 yards rushing. That was abysmal. But Ohio State's been hurt. We talk about it every week, gash plays, but most of the rushing attempts, the teams have not been able to hurt Ohio State consistently, gaining 6 yards, 8 yards, 4 yards, 12 yards. They've hit them for 50 and 60 on occasion. The Michigan wide receivers against the Ohio State secondary, again, best quarterback they've faced right here, Shea Patterson. He's playing the best. Trace McSorley's had the better career. Shea Patterson is playing the best. The Nick Bosa loss is huge because of this. Yes, they were giving up gash plays when he was there, but he makes about 5 to 10 plays per game that stop drives, that hurry a quarterback into making a bad throw on 3rd and 7. That force him from the pocket to throw it away on 2nd and 10, that stop drives or put a team behind the sticks. And then he makes 1 or 2 plays typically that come close to changing a game, a la TCU, a strip sack, a batted ball in the air, a game-changing kind of play. And Draymond Jones is really good. Chase Young's really good up front, but they're not as skilled. Like, this guy's got NFL technique when we talk Nick Bosa, and of course he's been gone and long gone for a long time. He's not part of the team, but that's been the difference in Ohio State's defense. Yes, they've gotten gashed the whole season, but he brought that presence that won the game against TCU, basically. All right, let's go to the elite defense, Michigan's defense. Don Brown knows what he's doing. Bill Belichick made a comment that there's no better coach around than Don Brown. Put the athletes with the coaching, and it's scary. They're number one in the nation in yards given up per game, 235. Number one in pass defense. Top 10 in rush defense. Number 4 in points given up. And most of those points probably didn't much matter, like the last touchdown against Penn State and one against Wisconsin. Chase Winovich, upper body injury against Indiana in the last quarter last week. A bit of a struggle for Michigan. They trailed 17-15 in the third quarter. The x-rays came back negative, but Jim Harbaugh was cautious in his news conference, saying that Chase Winovich, it's questionable. They're going to have to go day to day. He's probably trying to hold back. Chase Winovich playing like his hair's on fire all the time. He will make a difference on that defense. If he's not able to play, yes, there's still a great defense, but man, he makes plays. 12 tackles for loss, and again, he brings energy. He is the leader of the revenge tour, Chase Winovich. Rashawn Gary missed a lot of time midseason. He's back. He's back at full strength. He had a huge game against Indiana. 9 tackles, 1.5 sacks. Rashawn Gary is a monster, and they're going to have to deal with him at the defensive end position. The tackles tie things up and allow everybody else to make plays. Devin Bush is one of the best linebackers in the country. 8.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. That doesn't do him justice. He leads the team in tackles, and he can do it all. He rushes the passer. He's a great run stopper, and he can drop back, and he's fluid in coverage. Devin Bush. Khaleke Hudson. He's pretty much taken over that Jabril Peppers role where he's he's the Swiss Army knife that Don Brown loves to throw at safety, bring up in the box, move him around, do what you need. Where is he? We need to locate Khaleke Hudson. The cornerbacks are exceptional. It's probably the best duo in the country in David Long and Lavert Hill. Michigan only gives up 47% completion percentage in a day and age when almost everybody completes 65%. 47%. That is, not surprisingly, the number one stat in the country. Speaking of stats, I hesitate comparing games, but we've got 6 games to match up these teams. They have played 6 common opponents. They are the other 6 teams, the 5 in the division, and they both played Nebraska. Here are the comparisons. Add them up. Now, of course, we've got to put it into context because Ohio State played Maryland last week and Michigan played them like 6 weeks ago. So things change. But once you add it all up, it points to dominance versus skating by. They both went 6-0 against these 6 opponents. Let's look at it. Penn State, Buckeyes beat them 27-26. They trailed by 12, 8 minutes to play. Dwayne Haskins put on the rally, and they scored twice in the final 8 minutes, and the defense shut down, of course, Trace McSorley from 4th and 5. So Ohio State goes to Penn State, and they squeak out a win against a team that we thought was one of the 5 to 10 best teams in the nation at the time. They have proven not to be. They're a good team. They're a top 20 team. Ohio State was outgained in that game 492 to 389 by 103 yards, and it was probably more than twice that much before the final 2 drives. Ohio State drove it 99 yards and then like 75 for touchdowns. They did hold Penn State to 3 of 17 on third down. So even though they got shredded for 500 yards, close to 500 yards of total offense, the Buckeyes, of course, dominated the final 8 games, 8 minutes, and won the game 27-26. Michigan annihilated Penn State. It was 42-0. Penn State scored a touchdown that meant nothing with 20 seconds left. 42-7. They outgained Penn State by 217 yards, 403 to 186, and held Penn State to 2 for 11, converting third downs. No comparison between the 2 efforts, but the Buckeyes did have to play in Happy Valley in front of a hostile crowd, but they skimmed by with a big comeback in the final 8 minutes. Michigan annihilated Penn State. Trace McSorley was banged up in that game. Indiana, Buckeyes win at 49-26. Big fourth quarter. to pull away. It was a close game. Ohio State rang up 609 yards of total offense. They did give up 406, so they had a 203-yard advantage and held Indiana to 3 for 14 on third down. Michigan won just last week. Good game, 31-20. Once they got out and scored in the fourth quarter, it wasn't close down to the wire, but it was a close game for 3+ quarters. 31-20, 507 to 385 in yardage. They held Indiana, did not hold them. Indiana converted 9 of 17 third downs. So Buckeyes, better effort against Indiana. Again, that game was at home. Indiana, both played them at home, rather. All right, the Nebraska game is the biggest disparity here by far. Buckeyes hold off Nebraska at home 36-31. They barely outgain the Huskers 481 to 450. They did hold Nebraska to 4 for 14 on third down conversions. Michigan thumped the Huskers 56 to 10, 491 to 132 in total yardage. That was a 359-yard advantage, 3 for 13, holding Nebraska on third down. So the Buckeyes, yeah, they generally held a 1-2 score lead. Once they gained the lead in the third quarter, and there was a late Nebraska touchdown that made it somewhat close. They did get the ball back, could have scored to win the game. So it was close. Michigan crushed them. Okay, Michigan State. These are similar efforts. Buckeyes' score looks better in some respects, but Michigan was more dominant. Both games in East Lansing. Buckeyes win 26-6. They outgain Sparty 347 to 274 by 73 yards. They hold Michigan State to 2 for 16 on third downs. Michigan's effort was even more dominant, 21-7 final score, but they turned the ball over on offense to give Michigan State the minuscule field to score the one touchdown. Outgained at Michigan State 395 to 94. Only gave up 94 yards of total offense, held Michigan State to 0 for 12 on third down. So Ohio State played much better than Michigan State, but Michigan dominated Michigan State. And finally, Maryland, again, no comparison between the two efforts. The Buckeyes offense obviously showed out, 52-51 in overtime, 688 in total offense for the Buckeyes, but they gave up 535 and all that rushing yardage, and held Maryland to 4 for 13 to third down conversions. Michigan won 42-21. One of those touchdowns was a kick return, and one touchdown didn't matter. So they really gave up one touchdown that mattered in that game, and they gained 465 to 220. They held a 244-yard advantage in total offense and held Maryland down on third down, 5 of 13. All right. These two teams could show up completely different on Saturday. The Buckeyes would have the advantage of being at home, of course, but also have the psychological advantage of knowing, hey, we always beat that team over there. Michigan always knowing we've never been able to beat that team. So for the guys that have been around, and that's going to be most of these guys on the field, they've played in this rivalry game. And I don't think Michigan lacks in confidence, but what if Ohio State jumps out 10-0? Maybe it plants a seed of doubt in their minds, while Ohio State may think, okay, this is our week. We've been waiting to break through and show who we really are. That's conjecture on my part, but it's pretty logical. That all said, defense travels. Michigan wins 27-20. They're just a better football team. They've put it all together. I don't think they have more talent, but the defensive genius of Don Brown and pulling that all together, and the offense is very efficient. Ohio State misses a running quarterback. Having that threat, Dwayne Haskins, is exceptional, and that's they have more than a puncher's chance. Let's not phrase it that way. Maryland has a puncher's chance against Michigan. Ohio State is just as talented, if not more talented, on the roster than Michigan. This edition, though, is not as good a team as Michigan. Michigan is one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country. Ohio State is more in the 10-12 range, the way that they're playing. It would not shock me if Ohio State won the game. Urban Meyer comes through in rivalry games. He comes through. He's got the best winning percentage in modern college football history. Jim Harbaugh, though, time for him to break through, go to the Big Ten championship game and win, and Michigan wins it despite what I think or feel, 27-20. There's your final. Leave the comments. I want your prediction as well on the game, Ohio State and Michigan. Leave your memories as well of the Buckeyes and the Wolverines right here where we do it better than anyone else on discussion, debate, and analysis of college football. Mark Rogers TV.